Hi, my name is Scott Kellum. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Typetura, and I'm really excited to talk with you today about intrinsic typography. So what is intrinsic typography? Well, it's something brand new, so it's probably something you've never heard before. Intrinsic typography is text that self-adjusts to the area in which it is rendered. So that's really different from what we currently do. We currently typeset for every module that is on a page. And that module also needs to work in every area of the layout along with every breakpoint and device that it is rendered on. That can get quite cumbersome. This is something that I became intimately familiar with when I worked at Vox Media. So at Vox Media, I worked to launch SB Nation and Vox.com. And at Vox, I was tasked with designing and developing the home pages. Within these home pages is the hero module. Within this hero module, there could be 6 different entry types. And each of these entries had a different typographic style. In this hero section, we had all of these different layouts. And all of these entries could fit into different slots inside of these layouts. Additionally, this had to be responsive, so it had to work across the breakpoints we were using on our website. Now, if we're just looking at the headlines, the result here is 78 unique headline styles just for the hero section of this website. And that is just an astronomical number for what we're trying to do here. This is too much. This is too much to design and too much to develop. And there has to be a better way to do this. But there's really nothing you could do with the current paradigm of typesetting on the web. It would be really nice if we could just create 6 headline styles here and have those respond to the areas of the layout and the breakpoints in which they appear. And that's what intrinsic typography is. It enables you to create typography that adapts to the various contexts that we have on the responsive web. And this problem isn't limited to Vox Media websites. It's everywhere on the web. All of these websites have typography that needs to work within various areas of the layout across multiple breakpoints. We have all of these tools that make our websites more flexible and dynamic, but we need more tools that make our typography more flexible and dynamic. Now, you might be thinking that variable fonts are the answer here. But while variable fonts themselves can stretch and expand, we are limited by CSS in what it can do to make our typography more flexible. Intrinsic typography bridges this gap as well. It provides us with the tools we need to typeset more flexibly. So you might be asking yourself, what does intrinsic typography look like? Well, it looks something like this. So here we could see all of these different articles on this page. And along with that, there's what looks to be a lot of different headline styles. But these are intrinsic headline styles. So there is one single CSS rule set that is defining all of these at once. To better see how this works, let's just adjust the size of the top 2 headlines. You could see how this expansion and contraction expands and contracts the headlines themselves. And this expansion and contraction is all defined within this one intrinsic headline style. Here's another perspective of this headline style. And it contains all of the different possibilities for this headline style extruded into one shape. And depending on the area your text occupies, an instance is pulled from this and used as your typesetting. So when we're creating a website, Instead of typesetting every piece of text individually, we could define more broadly what our text is doing and draw on intrinsic typographic styles. So this completely changes the way we look at our typography. We start to look at what our text is communicating as opposed to how it is typeset in each individual module of our website. When starting a new project, as opposed to looking at all of the typesetting for each individual module, you start to think about the typography more holistically in terms of your communication needs. So let's identify what this typography needs to do everywhere. And as you get to implementation, that becomes a lot easier because you have all of the styles you need for all of the contexts in which your content shows up in. So let's look at how intrinsic typography can be applied to a lot of real-world websites. This is the Girls' Night In shop. Now you can see at the top of the page there are 4 smaller entries, and further down there are larger links to various sections of this website. But the typography here follows a similar pattern. So as we create intrinsic typographic styles, we can consolidate these modules and make a more compelling page with way less code. And the result is something a lot more fluid and dynamic across all of these different screen sizes. The outline has also done a fantastic job with typography. It's really elegant and purposeful, and it changes to become more dynamic as the page scales up. But you could see in this before example where all of the breakpoints start to affect the typography. Whereas after, with intrinsic typographic styles, all of these breakpoints are smoothed out. There is no chance to have an awkward in-between size for your typography. Additionally, all of these headlines have been consolidated. So even the primary headline at the top is using the exact same typographic styles as all of the headlines below. So that consolidation results in much more typographic consistency with much less code. There are no longer separate typographic styles for each breakpoint and portion of the layout. So with intrinsic typography, your website looks better in more places. It becomes far more dynamic and flexible. We have also seen an up to 90% reduction in typographic styles, and that has a huge impact on your workflow, as you're having to deal with and manage much less code. At the moment, Typetura is the only intrinsic typographic tool, but we really hope that browsers start to implement some of these features and functionality natively. Because the result is happier designers. Designers designing with way more flexibility, creating far more dynamic layouts than ever before. Developers are also happy. They get to write way less code and get to implement things more consistently with less tech debt. Managers are happier as well, because all of these efficiencies result in projects being executed more quickly at a higher level of quality. So intrinsic typography is the future of typesetting. It enables far more typographic richness with far less complexity. So now we have a basic understanding of what intrinsic typography is. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the mechanics of it and maybe answer some questions you might have. So here we have a website and all of this text is typeset with intrinsic typography. You can see as we scale this up and down, this text responds to the different containers that they're in as opposed to the viewport itself. Over here on the right, we have some CSS, and this is what an intrinsic style looks like. Up here at the top, we have some styles that might look a little bit more familiar to you. And these are our fallback styles for if somebody's not using a modern or up-to-date web browser. Below this is where things start to get interesting. Here, in these keyframes, we have our intrinsic styles. And up here at the top, we reference those keyframes with the TT key custom property. Just below that, we define the rate of change across the different areas the text might be rendered in with this cubic Bezier function. And then below that, we define the area or range of which we are defining the text. So as a result of these styles, the text responds and adapts to the area in which it is placed. There's no need for layout-specific styles or breakpoints. Now you might be wondering, how do you manage hierarchy here? Let's say you specifically wanted this headline at the top to be more important than the headlines below. Currently, this is done by the nature of it being in a larger container. But you might want a little bit more control over how you might manage this. This is especially important as you scale the page down, and then you lose this differentiation that the layout provides. Well, there are two ways to approach this. As I scroll down here, let's call this a primary headline. And I can uncomment this and change the shape of this headline in this particular instance. So all of the styles are the same. It's just, it is expanding and contracting at a slightly different rate as the ones below it. And this allows us to further emphasize that this is the most important headline on the page. Now, because our intent is to differentiate this primary headline from the rest of the headlines, we might want to create a new CSS rule set for those particular styles. And that's okay. We could still do that with intrinsic typography. So let's comment this out, and then create a new style for this primary headline. So as we scale this page up and down, we could see that this new style is differentiated from the other headline styles. And we also save a lot of code because we don't have to create new styles for every single breakpoint. You have far more typographic control than you ever had before, and the increase in efficiencies and reduction in code is just a side effect. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and look forward to your questions and comments.